Did you know that Daniel Craig almost turned down his final outing as James Bond? In fact, after Spectre, he famously said he'd rather slash his wrist than play Bond again. Yet here we are, with No Time to Die, marking his final mission, a mission that would change James Bond forever. One decision, one final story, and boom, the most controversial Bond film of all time was born. In 2021, after multiple delays and a global pandemic, James Bond finally returned to theaters. The marketing promised an epic conclusion, a fitting farewell to Daniel Craig's era. The trailers teased everything fans wanted: exotic locations, intense action, and a story that would tie up all loose ends. Even the title seemed perfect: No Time to Die. But something went wrong. Despite impressive box office numbers and some positive reviews, many fans left theaters feeling empty. For a movie that made the boldest choice in Bond history, killing off 007 himself, why did it leave so many feeling underwhelmed? In this video, we're going to break down some of the reasons of what went wrong with No Time to Die. And a real quick ask that if you're not subscribed to our channel yet, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. It's one small click for you, but a huge deal for us. Thanks! The death of invincibility. For 60 years, across 25 films, James Bond had one constant: he always survived. No matter the odds, no matter the villain, 007 would find a way. It was a part of the escapist fantasy that made Bond who he was. But in 2021, something changed. In the final moments of No Time to Die, we watched as missiles rained down on our hero, marking the first time in the official franchise that Bond didn't make it out alive. Let's be clear, this wasn't just any death scene. This was a conscious choice to fundamentally alter the DNA of a character that had been carefully crafted since 1962. Bond didn't just die, he chose to die. He accepted his fate to save his love interest and a daughter he barely knew. It was meant to be powerful, it was meant to be emotional. Instead, it felt forced, as if the writers were more interested in shocking the audience than serving the character. The problem wasn't the concept of killing Bond, it was how they got there. The film manufactured a scenario where Bond had to die because he was infected with nanobots programmed to kill his family, even if he ever touched them. It's the kind of sci-fi plot device that feels more at home in a Marvel movie than a Bond film. And here's the thing, they never even properly established that there was no cure. Q, the genius who can build anything, simply says it's permanent, and that's that. No attempts to find a solution, no last-minute scientific breakthrough, just acceptance. The family man fallacy. Perhaps the biggest departure from Bond's character wasn't his death, it was the attempt to turn him into a family man. The film reveals that Bond has a 5-year-old daughter with Madeleine Swan, a character introduced in Spectre whose relationship with Bond never felt earned or convincing. This brings us to one of the film's fundamental flaws. It asks us to be emotionally invested in a relationship that was barely developed in the previous film and a daughter we just met. The James Bond we know isn't a family man, not because he can't be, but because the very nature of his job makes it impossible. This is a man who's watched everyone he's ever loved either die or betray him. The film tries to force an emotional connection by giving him a child, but it feels like a shortcut rather than a natural character development. The villain problem. Remember when Bond villains were memorable? From Goldfinger to Blofeld, Silva to Lyutsifer, these were antagonists who left an impression. But No Time to Die gives us Lyutsifer Safin, played by Oscar winner Rami Malek, who might just be the most forgettable villain in Craig's entire run. Let's break down what makes Safin so problematic. He starts strong, a mass figure seeking revenge for his family's murder. Great setup. But then the film completely loses track of who he is or what he wants. He kills all of Spectre, which happens off-screen in an anticlimactic way, then suddenly pivots to, what exactly? World domination? Playing God? Even if he doesn't seem sure, at one point he delivers a monologue about wanting to be an invisible god, but it feels like something he's read off of a generic villain speech's cue card. And the film spends 4 movies building up Spectre and Blofeld as the ultimate threat, only to kill them off in a single scene that feels more like housekeeping than storytelling. Christopher Waltz's Blofeld, who is positioned as Bond's arch-nemesis, is reduced to a glorified cameo that ends with him dying from accidental exposure to nanobots. It's like the writers are so eager to move on to the new villain that they forgot to give the old ones a proper send-off. The woke debate. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the introduction of a female 007. When it was announced that Lashana Lynch would be taking over Bond's code number, certain corners of the internet exploded with outrage. But here's the thing. The problem isn't that they gave the 007 designation to a black woman. The problem is that they didn't give her anything meaningful to do with it. Nomi, Lynch's character, is introduced as Bond's replacement, seemingly setting up an interesting dynamic about the old guard versus the new. Instead, she's relegated to being Bond's sidekick, never getting a chance to truly shine on her own. The film wants credit for its progressive casting while still keeping her firmly in Bond's shadow. It's a half measure that satisfies nobody. Those who want a traditional Bond are annoyed by the change, while those hoping for real progress are disappointed by how little the film does with her character. The plot holes and conveniences. No Time to Die is riddled with plot conveniences that strain credibility, even by Bond movie standards. Take the opening sequence. Bond is ambushed at Vesper's grave, immediately assumes Madeline betrayed him, despite having zero evidence, and abandons her. This isn't the methodical spy we've come to know. It's a plot device to create artificial drama. Then there's the matter of the nanobots themselves. The film never properly explains how they work, why they can't be cured, or why MI6 was developing them in the first place. It's a MacGuffin that exists solely to force Bond into an impossible situation at the end. And don't even get us started on how Safin acquired an entire island facility without any intelligent agency noticing. Perhaps the biggest issue with No Time to Die is how it handles Bond's legacy. The Craig era started with Casino Royale, which brilliantly reinvented Bond for the modern age. It showed us a more human, vulnerable 007 while still maintaining the essential elements that made the character great. But somewhere along the way, particularly in Spectre and No Time to Die, the series became obsessed with connecting everything into one big story. This obsession with continuity and personal stakes ultimately backed the writers into a corner. They felt they needed to top everything that came before, leading to increasingly drastic choices: Bond falling in love, having a child, and ultimately dying. But in trying to make everything bigger and more emotional, they lost sight of what made Bond special in the first place. Missed opportunities. One of the most frustrating aspects of No Time to Die is how many opportunities it squandered. Take Ana de Armas's character, Paloma, for example. Her brief appearance in Cuba provides one of the film's most entertaining sequences, a perfect blend of action, humor, and classic Bond style. Yet she disappears after just one scene, never to be seen again. The sequence shows exactly what the movie could have been, a thrilling spy adventure with clear stakes and memorable characters. Instead, we got bogged down in convoluted family drama and poorly explained sci-fi elements. The contrast between this sequence and the rest of the film is stark. It's as if, for one brief moment, No Time to Die remembered it was supposed to be a James Bond movie. The production struggles. It's worth noting that the film faced significant challenges during production. From Danny Boyle's departure as director to multiple script rewrites, COVID-19 delays, and the pressure of concluding Daniel Craig's era, these behind-the-scenes issues likely contributed to the final product's inconsistent nature. However, production troubles don't fully explain the fundamental misconceptions about what makes Bond work as a character. The decision to saddle him with a family and then force him to sacrifice himself feels like a natural conclusion to his story and more like a desperate attempt to do something different just for the sake of being different. The identity crisis. At its core, No Time to Die suffers from an identity crisis. It wants to be both a traditional Bond film and a deconstruction of the character. It wants to honor the past while breaking from tradition. It wants to be both emotional, resonant, and spectacularly entertaining. In trying to be everything, it often ends up being less than the sum of its parts. The film seems almost embarrassed by some of Bond's traditional elements, the gadgets, the one-liners, the sense of fun that made the series what it is. Yes, Craig's era has always been more serious, but previous entries like Casino Royale and Skyfall found ways to balance the gritty realism with the essential Bond elements. So, where does this leave the franchise? By killing off James Bond, No Time to Die has painted the series into a corner. Sure, we know James Bond will return, the producers have already confirmed as much. But how do you follow an entry that literally killed your main character? What do you think about the direction No Time to Die took with James Bond? Was killing him off a bold creative choice or a fundamental mistake? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest videos. This video was made by movie fans for movie fans.